You're going to mediation, and alimony is a top consideration in your case. Whether you're the person paying the alimony or you're the person receiving the alimony, getting to the right number, not just a number, but getting to the right number is of paramount concern on both sides of the case. The alimony statute doesn't go out the window simply because you chose to mediate. Reason still prevails, compromise still prevails, and all of the statutory factors that a court would use in reaching an alimony determination are all in play. We're gathering that information up front. What was the marital lifestyle? What was the budget? And in mediation, we can test that. We can ask questions. Did you really spend $2,500 a month on groceries for 3 people? Let's talk a little bit more about that number. Just because it's on the paper doesn't mean the mediator accepts that as factual. Likewise, people that are paying the alimony are fearful. They're uncertain about how they're suddenly going to maintain 2 separate households. Well, everyone can't live exactly the same way you lived when you were married because now there are 2 houses. Of course, there are extreme high earners where that can be the case, but in the vast majority of cases, we're all changing our lifestyles a little bit post-divorce. And how do we get there? And how do we make the numbers make sense? How much? How long? What happens if I lose my job? What happens if my bonuses suddenly start to shrink? I'm commission only. What happens if my commissions decline? These are all topics we cover in mediation when we're looking to resolve alimony. My spouse said, no way, over their dead body are they going to pay me alimony. Can I still mediate my case? Of course you can. Perhaps the mediator reads the room and says, we're not going to start with the alimony. Let's work on all the other issues and back into the alimony number. You can't simply decide, I'm going to read the alimony statute, I understand what the law says, but I want to do something that's so contrary to what the law says. Can you do an alimony buyout? Meaning, one spouse decides to pay the alimony up front in some discounted fashion, trading an asset, or making a lump sum payment. That's something you could do in mediation. But a flat-out refusal to pay alimony is just not a reasonable position. And so if we were in the setting of a courtroom and you have a spouse that should be paying alimony, that has the financial ability to pay the alimony, and simply says no, in those cases, a judge would likely shift counsel fees. This is something we say to parties in mediation. If you were in court and you flat out refuse to pay alimony, and this is a case where you should be paying alimony, a court would likely order that you pay your spouse's counsel fees, and that could be tens of thousands of dollars. Are we really going down this road, or is there a more practical solution? And oftentimes it's unpacking and digging deep into the why. Sometimes it's just the word alimony. Sometimes it's the thought of writing that check every single month. Sometimes it's something completely different. But these are all creative things. These are all conversations that we have very candidly at the mediation table. How do you prepare to discuss alimony and mediation? First, you have to understand what your budget was. It doesn't matter if you were the spouse that paid the bills or your spouse paid the bills, you had no visibility. You need to have a sense of what was my housing costs? What were my expenses for my automobiles? What were my personal expenses? Groceries, hair, nails, restaurants, vacations, clothing, dry cleaning, cleaning person, all of the things. Your gym membership, your streaming memberships, your everything memberships. What was your budget? That is the starting point of an alimony analysis. I need to know what the budget was. Why? Because I need to assess what your need is. And we also need visibility on income. I typically am doing a 5-year look back. Sometimes a 3-year look back is appropriate. And I'm looking at what was the earning capacity of the family. How much did you actually earn? And then we could start talking about what the payor can afford to pay and what the needs are of the payee and all the other factors that go into calculating an appropriate level of alimony. If you have any questions about how alimony will impact your divorce and you want to mediate, give us a call one of the trusted members of our team can walk you through not just what alimony is and what it isn't, but what it looks like in a mediation setting.